Sorry, that took a second to get going. Let us go to our project folder. So what I wanted to talk about is naming conventions. The naming conventions in Unity is kind of really important when you're structuring a project, especially when you're talking about structuring like all your assets and how do you collaborate with other assets, that kind of thing. So there's a couple different things that we want to go over when oh shit, just excuse me while I bring up my notes again. So there's a couple different things that we want to think about. One is naming things. We should name things, especially when we start going to like game object and then like 3D object, cube. We end up with a bunch of stuff that's generic. So the first thing we want to do is create naming conventions that make sense. So name things. One, name things descriptively. We can do this in a lot of different ways. And if we're going to have multiple of a thing, generally what I usually tell people is to create a name, name of thing, and then if I'm going to have multiple of that thing, I will use 0, 1. Now, why don't I just say name of thing 1? Well, unfortunately, the way that sorting works a lot of times, they're looking for a number 0, then 1. So if you do this and then you have a list bigger than 9, you're actually going to have a big problem because once you get over 9, it's going to sort like name of thing 10, name of thing 11, and then it's going to get all your like first couple digits of things in a weird order. So like when we're using computers, when we're hunting, when we're setting up lists and all that kind of junk, this is very important the way we name things. So if we're going to have multiple of something, we might put an enumerator at the end as a suffix. And that way also all of these stay in the same group. So that's all the thing, that's kind of the beginning of it. The other thing that we're going to do here is we're going to name things in Pascal case. So Pascal case looks like this. I am a modern general. Okay? So you may have also heard of camel case. I can't spell camel, but case. And camel case, this is camel case. So it's a little bit different. You may see naming conventions of different, of whatever, but the way that you should be naming folders in general, this is for folders specifically, but objects as well, should be using Pascal case. The other thing to note about it is that we don't use spaces. So do not use spaces. Spaces are the devil. We get really messed up when we're trying to search for things and there's spaces. Generally, we do not have them in anything. So try to stay away from those at all. The other thing that we might also want to do is name our objects by type with a prefix. Like text for texture, or matte for material. And you may not know what all those are yet, but we'll get to them, and I'll do some examples as well when we make our folder structure in a second. So we'll go back to here, and in our assets, there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. I'm going to give you one way of doing it, one way that works well specifically in Unity. It's also not going to necessarily mean that you'll come across a programmer who will yell at you for it, but there's one for every thing that you do. So we've got our main asset folder right here. And when we're going to create folders, we're going to create maybe a prefab folder. And I'm going to just use underscore prefabs. And I'm going to create myself a prefab folder. That's where I'm going to put all my prefabs. And I'm using this underscore because it sorts folders to the top of the list automatically. So I'm actually going to alter my scenes folder. as well. And so the name of the game when we're talking about organizing our sets of folders is clarity, and it's always going to depend on what kind of structure that you have. So if you have no 3D models, obviously it doesn't make any sense to make a 3D model folder. And there's a lot of different ways to organize things. So the idea is you want each folder to be in digestible chunks as much as possible. There's a couple different ways we could do that. But generally in video game development, you're going to see two main folders. You're going to see source, SRC. It might also look all lowercase. And any folder that I create, I'm going to use the underscore before it so that it sorts everything to the top. The reason why I'm doing this is because Unity, although it does a great job of adding the packages section, if you're importing other stuff, oftentimes, like other people's assets, it'll import to the main assets folder, and you may just want to keep it there for simplicity's sake so that you can sync it again later and not have to click on things. I totally understand that. So when you do that, you want to you'll see all of those packages sort to the bottom, which is kind of helpful because for me, if I'm using 4 or 5 packages, I want to get at the stuff that I'm making. I'm just using all their stuff for reference. So all my top level folders will have this underscore. So underscore source is one of them. And then the other thing we have here is underscore art. Okay, so source is going to be for all of our source code, all of our scripts and things. And then art is going to have all of our art type things. We're going to keep scenes as a main folder up at top, and prefabs, honestly, I access prefabs a lot. I like to kind of keep these at top level. You may also see that prefabs and scenes go in art or whatever. So, you'll see different structures. This is just the way I'm doing it. So if we go into art, we're going to create a couple folders. Now, since these are all my own folders, I don't have to do that underscore thing except for the top assets folder. So I might create myself materials. I might make models. We might have audio. Textures. Animations. And with we'll drill down a little bit deeper for other things. And then we might also have, I am missing something. I can't remember what it is right now. We'll leave that one as new. We'll just delete that one for now. I'll come back. So we've got a couple different pieces of artwork type things that we go in here in animations. Oh, I remember what it is. Timelines. Create folder. Timelines. So I'm going, these are all just really high level things. If you've been taking a look through your syllabus, each one of these is a whole module. So we're going to be going through all of these one at a time. But I just wanted to kind of outline what your folder structure should look like so you'll stay organized throughout the project. And as you come across these, you can kind of fill in as you wish and as you animate. So we got, or as you get through your coursework. So we've got in our animations folder, character, controllers, and then you might organize this by like AI and player, for instance. There's a lot of different ways this might go down. It depends on what you need. In audio, generally, this is probably the most organized folder for me because it's pretty straightforward, is music. UI, and then SFX, and then VO. So VO being voiceover, SFX being like all the regular sound effects in a game. And then, we would use our naming conventions to create the right thing. So if we have in our SFX, oops, I was just doing this morning, SFX explosion 0, 0. If 0, 0 is indexing by 0. What I mean by that is some people count by saying, what is the first number? 1. And then 1 is the first number. Indexing by 0 means that 0 is the first number. Programmers like this, so we want to index by 0 as much as possible. So we always start things at 0, 0. So we might have SFX explosion, and then we can just very quickly, in my system, 1, 2, and then if I wanted to, and this is depends on, like, usually I do this for lines of VO, so it might be VO character, line number, take number. So it might be VO can line number is like cutscene 001 underscore whatever, maybe there's some extra identification for, exactly like 101, and then line is 0001 because it's the first thing that the first character says. I might also add a descriptive text at the end that says, like, hello, game devs. And this part at the end here will help me visually understand what the heck is actually in this content, while the naming convention at the beginning will allow us to very quickly sort. So we've got, this is the take number, right? So we can go line 02. So this one might read, hello, game devs. This one might read, hello, game devs. All right. So that way we can very quickly kind of organize things. So naming conventions are important. Naming things are great. Materials, you might be creating materials in here. So create material. This material is going to be mat underscore red. And let's make sure that that's true. There we go. So now I've got a material underscore red. If you haven't used Unity too much, remember that we can always zoom in and out and make it a list versus a bit of images. I generally stay in the list category. We also have models. Models might have their own animations and textures and things of that nature. It depends on how your art pipeline works. If you're making it all from scratch, you can have the opportunity to create your folders structure correctly so that it imports properly. Otherwise, this generally tends to be a mess of whatever I'm importing. So it might have textures in here or not. Textures are 2D objects, so like images. Materials are the things that make the images shiny or metallic or look different. It's kind of the programmatical application of light. And then timelines are like our cutscene stuff, like the beginning of our cutscene stuff. Let's go back to the top of art. So you might have more folders in here once we go, once your project goes on. It might be even more organized, for instance. So for models, we might have environments, terrain. We might have props, and then those might also further be organized. This might also be reflected in prefabs. I'm just going to copy paste some stuff. Oh, looks like I can't do that. Never mind. So I'm going to, so in prefabs, we might also have like player prefabs. Oops. AI. And environment. But then we might also have some other stuff like pickups, that might be organized under gameplay or something else if you have a lot of different like pickups and spawn points. If you have a lot of variety there, it depends on how organized you need to be. So in your scenes folder, generally the way that you want to make your scenes work is you want to create a scene for each homework assignment that you're going to be doing. I have a naming convention, which I forget exactly, but let's say it's saying it's Thompson K underscore pro builder assignment. And then, like always, we want to indicate, we want to put we want to enumerate it. We'll do this with most things, and if I don't, I end up doing it anyway. I know that a lot of you, even though I suggest using GitHub, don't use GitHub to back up their work. So instead of making tons of iterations of the same thing, use GitHub. But if you don't, because several of you will not, it is inevitable. Just create a good naming convention for all of this stuff, and then have your assignments be named accordingly. Now, don't have all of the you're going to be going through some assignments that are just kind of tests or whatever. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to make a test folder in our scenes. I always have a test folder. I might have a test folder that has a bunch of different scenes, but test underscore platforming 00, and then I might indicate player jump length floating, or big. And then I might have another scene, create scene, test platforming 01, player jump length small. All right, so just be very descriptive in what you're doing. Keep a test folder full of like little one-off stuff. This will be very helpful for when you go back and you're like, oh, how did I what folder did I put in the thing that makes the door open and close when the player walks by it? Maybe you did like a little script and you want to have just an example of that. So keeping a little test folder is important. All right. So, what else? All right, so that's for the art folder. In your textures, you might also have a couple different things like backgrounds, skyboxes, and then UI. UI is almost always, user interface is almost always broken up. Now you could, instead of having it all broken down in here, perhaps you just want to put this all in the top level because you don't have any imported assets. That's totally fine. Go for it. There's not really a super wrong way to do it as long as it's organized. So if we go into our source folder, this is going to be the folder that we use most of our code. We might have a couple different folders, but the main two are, the main couple are like player scripts, or we can just put player. And then we might have shaders. So if you're programming any special shaders, that might go in there. We might have AI. And then I also usually have a manager folder. And this, in here, we'll talk about these in a second. But we might have a couple different things that like manage the scene. All right. So now that we've got all of these folders, these beautiful folders and this nice little asset layout, what we want to also do in our hierarchy is make sure that our hierarchy has some good naming conventions as well. So when you're making objects and creating and destroying them, what is it that your hierarchy can have? Let me just pull it up. The wonders of stream. Sorry, I just had this on my phone. All right. So, so in your sample scene, you've got a couple different things. One of the things that you're going to be learning in Pro Builder, at least a little bit, is that you want to chunk your area. And by chunking, what I mean is creating sets of assets that only exist in a certain area that you can quickly unload and load. So there's kind of a balance to be struck between legibility and usability for programmers and artists and designers to kind of implement different code and different scenes and scenarios. But generally, we're going to have in our sample scene, we've got our main camera here. Our main camera has an audio listener. This audio listener is the only one that we want in the scene. So if you ever get a warning because you added a second camera, the audio listener, you got to turn them off. Turn one of them off. It's kind of like the ears to the world, and it's where we receive audio for the player to then listen to. So we've got our main camera, our directional light. We'll delete this cube. So when we're creating objects, when we're organizing stuff in our hierarchy, what we're really doing is we're just parenting and childing things to game objects. In every single case, we want to make sure the position of our game object is at 0, 0, 0, and that the game object is named appropriately. There's a couple different things that we might do. Environment. And inside environment, we might create another quote unquote, a folder. And we might say gym, and then we might have another empty one, and we might call this one bathroom, and then hallway. I'm not going to fill in all of these, but you can kind of see where one will show what we do for the others. And we're going to put these all under environment. And so with this kind of chunking system, we want to grab or we want to put kind of the same stuff in each area. We're going to create another game object. This one's going to be called backgrounds. Create empty lights. And then we might also have props. So anything in the background that isn't moving, or that we're that we just kind of have either big set pieces or maybe some objects. You might throw some particles in here. You might just throw particles into the background as well. It depends. You don't have to get super deep or nested or anything like that, but a little organization goes a long way. And your environment can then encapsulate kind of like all of the look stuff, all of the artwork. Another thing to mention is if you're going to go have a GUI, a graphic user interface, you have to create a canvas, and the canvas creates a canvas and an event system. I leave these alone. Sometimes I rename canvas to something more interesting, but that's definitely going to be on the top of your hierarchy. The other thing that I might have, and so, if we have this directional light, I might move all of this also into a light folder. So it depends on how you want to work it. So if you're better working in chunks, you can also maybe bring in lights and then call these gym lights. And then you can organize stuff so that you can have some global illumination and stuff too. It depends on how it is that you want to do things. But having lights as a separate object is also all right. Environment, you're also going to create, I usually have a manager group. This is for video games specifically because there's a lot of different stuff going on. So I might have like a game manager. I might also create a like an AI manager, for instance. Perhaps there's something like that. A network manager. And this would just kind of house all the code that I might need in a game. We might also have a player. And the main camera obviously goes in the player all the time because that's, you know, who the player is usually. So there's some relationship to the camera. Someone's doing source filmmaker right now. That's good to know. And then we've got, you know, AI or, you know, anything like that, enemies. And then maybe puzzles or interactables. Now, you all are not programming a lot right now, but the other thing to mention in the hierarchy, just because I'm here and talking about naming conventions and hierarchy stuff, is if you're ever creating pools of objects, so like, oh, I can shoot off 20 bullets. Oftentimes we call these bullet pools, and what we do is instead of making a new object every time, we just recycle the same set of objects and turn them on and off. That way we can save programming background. It doesn't matter why, but these exist. So if you're like instantiating a bunch of objects, instead of just instantiating them in the hierarchy, we instantiate them into bullet pool or wherever, and that way we can manage them better, and it looks nicer. So it's really good. Let me make sure that I hit everything. Any questions? No? Okay. So, you know, it's pretty straightforward. Just be organized. Think about what it is that you're doing and how you're laying stuff out. You know, every battle plan goes to waste once you hit the battle. So once you start programming, things get a little rougher. But if you stay organized, it will really keep you going. So that's all I'm going to share about folder naming conventions now. Other than that, I will see you in class. Talk to you soon.